What's up, guys? Josh Pate here alongside Steve Wiltfong, 24/7 Sports. Time for the weekly Wiltfong recruiting whip around. Steve, it is still July, and we're still really busy. Alabama's offensive line class. Let's just start with that. That was the big news going into and kind of coming out of the weekend on Sunday, too. So what's the latest here, and how do you frame this in your world as it relates to how they stack up maybe when it comes to what's going on elsewhere in the SEC West?
Well, what a weekend for Nick Saban and Coach Flood and Alabama on the offensive line as they go out and add the number one offensive tackle in the 24/7 Sports composite, Tommy Brockermeyer, and his twin brother, the number one center in the 24/7 Sports composite, James Brockermeyer, to the fold on Friday, beating Texas for the two Longhorn legacies, and then going into the state of Georgia and beating their recruiting rival, the Bulldogs, for the number two offensive guard in the 24/7 Sports composite, and Terrence Ferguson. And you add those three guys to the number one offensive tackle and maybe ultimately, eventually, the number one overall recruit in the country in the top 247, J.C. Latham. And you have four stud, that's as good an offensive line haul as I can remember, and Coach Saban and Coach Flood aren't done as they continue to chip away at Amarius Mims, although I like Georgia for Amarius Mims, and I think I like Georgia even a little more now that Ferguson picked Alabama. I'm not sure that they were ever going to end up at the same school. They're in there fighting for Jagger Burton, top 247 offensive lineman from Kentucky. As they go up against Kentucky and Ohio State, a source close to Burton thinks that Kentucky and Alabama may have the edge in that recruitment. And Tristan Lay, the five-star offensive tackle from the state of Virginia, recently talked about how he's had some great Zoom sessions with Coach Flood. A top five of his is expected soon. I don't know for sure if Alabama's going to be in there, but I do think that they've put themselves in an intriguing position as they try and make up ground on the likes of LSU and Clemson, Ohio State being another climbing up the ladder for Tristan Lay. And Alabama may need all of these offensive linemen, Josh, because the way LSU could be recruiting, the trench warfare between these two programs on SEC Saturday late in the season could be special. LSU already has three pass rushers in the fold. Savion Jones, 29 tackles for loss and 13 sacks last year. Landon Jackson, 29 tackles for loss, also 17 sacks. And then Naquan Brown out of the state of Virginia, who's another twitchy pass rusher. I finally logged my crystal ball in favor of LSU for the number two defensive tackle in the land, number one player in the state, five-star defensive tackle, Mason Smith. And I feel like we've talked about this before. I'm like so close to putting in a forecast for Corey Foreman at LSU. Now, the confidence would be lower. I currently have it on USC, but several people think he's going to end up in the SEC. LSU and Georgia being those programs that you mark for Corey Foreman, who's the number one overall player in the 24/7 Sports composite. So how about a matchup of him and Latham for 3 years at LSU, Alabama, or Georgia and Alabama with Foreman, Alabama chipping away at Foreman as well. But and they could also land Shamar Turner, who's the best defensive line prospect in the state of Texas, another explosive player at the point of attack out of DeSoto. Ed Orgeron and his staff are going hard at Mason Smith. They're going hard at Corey Foreman, and they're going hard at Shamar Turner. Now, Shamar Turner, that recruiting battles all the SEC heavyweights, Josh, because you got Alabama in the middle of that one, and you got Georgia in the middle of that. I would have told you Alabama led for Shamar in the spring. Georgia's recruiting him as hard as anybody on their board, and same with LSU, with obviously the in-state programs trying to keep Shamar home in Texas. But, man, if LSU can land those six players on the defensive line, and Alabama closes out with one more blue chip offensive lineman to go with the four that they have in, I'll be locked in for those ball games.
Steve, a few months ago, you and I were, among the many things we were discussing, not discussing the race for number one. But now we are discussing the race for number one. And you just mentioned Alabama there. We got a couple other familiar names there. But it seems like, whereas we were talking about Ohio State nonstop for a little while, then we kind of went other directions, and the Buckeyes were just a mainstay. Well, now it looks like they could be on the eve of swinging back to a certain degree here.
Yeah, and LSU at number 4, and we just talked about all those guys. That would put them heavy in the mix to finish number 1. Georgia's been number 1 2 of the last 3 years. Alabama's been 1 or 2 in the last 12 years, and they've been 1 in 10 of those cycles. Ohio State's gotten 2 runner-ups, 2017 and 2018. Both those Ohio State classes were pound for pound the best classes in America, Josh, when looking at average ranking per commit. But like the year, I think Alabama had 29 commits in 2018 when they finished 1, and Ohio State, I think, had 21. And then Georgia won their first recruiting championship the next year, and Alabama actually finished 5. So that kind of refutes my statement of them finishing in the top 12 or in the top 12 straight years. It's 11 of the last 12 straight years. So I'm editing myself here. But Ohio State has a big commitment potentially teed up for this week in top 247 cornerback Jordan Hancock, a former Clemson commit, number 4 cornerback in the top 247 out of North Gwinnett High School in the state of Georgia. It's one of the best high school football programs in the Peach State. And he's a difference maker for them, 4.4 speed on the outside, length, physicality, brings everything you're looking for at the position, instincts. Ohio State was who I had crystal balled for him actually early in the process. And I think they led for the majority of it, but a visit to Clemson in late January kind of turned things. Proximity to home. Clemson's only about an hour and 20 minutes from Atlanta. Obviously, the Clemson program speaks for itself, and they've developed DBs as well. They got them in the fold, but I think that was more of an emotional decision. And as time went by, I think Jordan Hancock's heart was still in Columbus. That's, again, the program that had led the longest for him. He visited during the fall and loved it. And he kept in touch with them despite being committed to Clemson and Coach Combs. And Ohio State's been DBU as of late with all the first rounders they've had at corner. Shaun Wade looks to be the next one on deck for the Buckeyes. And Jordan Hancock reopened his recruitment last week. Ohio State's the clear favorite. I think we're going to see a decision this week. I like the Buckeyes going into it. Alabama and Georgia being a couple of the other schools that Hancock looked at throughout his recruitment. But being able to come in and potentially replace Shaun Wade as a true freshman in the same role, and then seeing himself becoming a first-round draft pick and playing with a lot of guys in this Ohio State recruiting class. I think Jordan's really connected with a lot of the guys in this class. I think those are the things that put Ohio State in great position to add Jordan Hancock, and that's going to give them some cushion as they battle Alabama down the stretch for number 1 and try and hold off a school like LSU or Georgia or Oregon or Oklahoma. Those are probably the other schools I would put in the mix to ultimately finish number 1.
Money, as always, a lot going on, folks. Keep it locked on 247sports.com and specifically Steve Wiltfong for all the latest. Steve, thanks, brother.
Take care, y'all.